Welcome to The Other Dimension with the team, Damon Penny, Ben Winfield, and Louisa Brown. We guide you through the supernatural, the occult, and the unexplained, answering questions that will make you question your grip of reality, with special guests guiding you through everything from demons to divination, cryptids to crystals, religion to skeptics. We explore in depth the true meaning of the unexplained. So strap in, kick back, and enjoy as we enter the other dimension.
Hello everybody, welcome to The Other Dimension, Got Stories to Tell. I am your host Kate, and with me today we've got my friend Nick Muley. Welcome in, Nick.
Thank you, glad to be here.
Awesome. Just a big shout out to Ben and Lou and Damon if you're watching, the OG hosts of The Other Dimension. They're taking a bit of a break at the moment, but just wishing them all well, and thank you also to all the viewers. I can't wait to see all of your comments. Any questions, please drop them down and we will ask Nick everything and anything that comes up, definitely. So Nick, I just wanted to kind of just have an overview about yourself. So tell us who Nick Muley is. I'm sure a lot of people on here will know who you are already, but if they don't, just give us an overview of who you are.
Well, obviously, for starters, I've been a paranormal investigator now for almost 20 years, since 2005, since I was 12 years old. So I've had quite a history in being involved in the subject matter. And I've studied numerous different haunted locations throughout these years. I've investigated a number of them. And it, of course, been meeting a lot of different, incredible investigators throughout over the years up to the present day, which, just shows us that we're continuing to grow as a paranormal community. And it's been quite a journey for me, but I know there's still a lot more to go through. So it's been, and of course, also additionally, like I've been a guest on several podcasts like this. I'm part of different networks, been hosting a number of different shows throughout North America and Europe. I mean, it's just been an incredible journey for me.
That's amazing. 20 years. Oh my gosh. You look very young. You don't look old enough to be investigating for 20 years.
Yeah, I
know. When did you start?
So, although I said that I've been doing it for almost 20 years, there's actually things that did kind of, as I would kind of more explain, like the origins of it. It even goes further back. So,
wow. Okay, I can't wait to hear about that.
I was going to say, I'm sure you probably have not even heard about this before. So, I guess my first time that I was exposed to the paranormal field, and also the horror film genre, and I'm still surprised that my parents got to let me watch this stuff. Me and my siblings got to watch this at such an early age, but we used to watch the X-Files back in the 90s, which
nice. Yeah, awesome. I mean, yeah.
Which at that time, was still relatively brand new and of course extremely popular. So yeah. I still remember. Again, I'm surprised my parents got to let us watch it at such a young age, because there were some pretty scary and violent and pretty graphic episodes, as I remember. So yeah, how they got the idea of us watching it, that's beyond me, of course. But that was kind of my first exposure to it. But then, as we fast forward a couple years later, again, me, especially with Don's show, Fear Fans, I also started watching horror films at a young age. So I've been watching those since I was about 6 or 7. So for the longest time.
So it's fair to say that you've always had a passion and been drawn to things that are spooky and horror and a bit scary. Is it like the thrill of it that you like?
I think it is. And also I was, when you're a young kid, and especially when you're going to school and you hear other kids talk about, you want to be part of it too. Even if it's not, child age appropriate, you still want to you want to basically be part of, like watch or check out what everyone else has been talking about. And
Yeah.
of course, like any parent back in those days, my parents were originally against this because like they would just say the typical thing. They were afraid it was going to give me nightmares.
Yeah,
But
sure.
I got into that stuff such an early age. And yes, it did give me nightmares, but there was such a thrill to it though, like
Yeah.
you just said. And but I guess other than the X-Files, the real first show real paranormal show that I was really exposed to, uh, now going to the early 2000s, was the show Scariest Places on Earth. And
Oh.
I mean, I still didn't necessarily believe in that kind of stuff. To us, Scariest Places on Earth was just our typical show that we would watch on Halloween because it was just such a fun show. But it
Yeah.
really didn't get started until about 2005. And also, one other show I forgot to mention that exposed me, and you and I have talked about it, is undoubtedly Are You Afraid of the Dark?
Yeah, on Nickelodeon.
Yeah,
Yeah, that was such
that
a good program.
that was to me that was Nickelodeon version of X-Files, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But it
Yeah, that's so true.
but it really started about 12 years old, where one night I just happened to be going through different channels, just trying to find something to watch on Friday night. And all of a sudden, I come across the show on the Travel Channel called Most Haunted. And
Oh, yeah, that was huge.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and this was back when this was back before Ghost Adventures took over, obviously.
Yeah.
This was back when the Travel Channel would only show these different old paranormal shows from the late 90s, early 2000s, like every Friday night.
This is like
So,
OG stuff right here.
yes,
Yeah.
it was. So I thought, I wonder what this is all about. So I watched it and, got to really learn what Most Haunted was. And it was like I was right into it. And then
Yeah.
every
I
Friday
loved
night
it.
I made sure to tune in. And that's what generated my interest in the that's what really got me started into it.
Oh, that's so cool. I'm just going to go through the comments because the comments are just on fire tonight. So just to say hi to Lou. Thank you so much for watching, Lou. Hope you're good. Eric is here. Now he wants to know when Nick Files will start again. And Nick Files is one of your podcasts that you have on Things Network, correct?
That's correct. Yeah, it's also on several other networks. So
Oh, nice.
with Nick Files, I mean, obviously, because I make so many presentations and PowerPoints out of these things, that takes a lot of my time to put together. So the reason why I haven't really done it for the last few months is I really needed a break and hiatus. So,
Sure.
but
I just want to explain about like your the Nick Files. So I will share your links on the other dimension, but basically Nick always has the most detailed and interesting PowerPoint presentations. He does all of his research, he does all of his sources, you have pictures, you have videos. You don't do this thing half-heartedly, like you go all out on a case or a location. It's super, super stuff. So if you haven't seen any of the Nick Files episodes, definitely check them out. We'll share the links out.
Yeah, but I would say that I'm hoping to bring season 3. I'm hoping to bring it back either sometime near the end of March or sometime after the first week or two in April. So it's going to come back real. I haven't worked on any presentations just yet, but I do have a list of locations that I want to definitely cover. So it's definitely in early development. I can definitely promise you that.
That's great. That's really good to hear, Nick. Awesome. And then Eric says, watching the X-Files recently. Yes, such good shows. Like they just don't make shows like that anymore. Seriously.
No, they don't. They really don't.
Gina Crow, welcome in. I think it's good to let younger generations see stuff about paranormal, even though it might seem scary. It doesn't close minds off to things science doesn't understand yet. It also keeps people understanding that you may need to be careful as well. Very, very true.
Definitely.
Totally agree with that. Wayne, hi Wayne.
Hey,
How
Wayne.
you doing? Did you have to mention that?
I knew he was going to say Wayne himself was on Most Haunted a number of years ago.
No way.
Yeah.
Wayne, which episode?
I don't remember, like when I first started watching. I don't think, just correct me if I'm wrong, Wayne. I don't think he was with them then, but he did tell me about it had to have been just in the last couple of years. So you might have to help me out with that, Wayne.
Yeah, definitely. I'm gonna watch it, Wayne. That's awesome. And then Eric very kindly has written, I know it's one of my fave podcasts. I think he's talking about Nick Files.
Yeah, see, he used to work for him, as he said.
No way. Wayne, what can we have more information, please? Like, how did you work with them when? Like, that's super interesting. Um, yeah, awesome. Um, what was your favorite thing to cover on the Nick Files?
So one of my favorites, I would probably have to say, it's not just only my favorite. I think it really, I think so many people really love this because
Hmm,
I did a 3-part episode. This was when I first kind of was still doing a couple episodes of Nick Files, and that
right.
was undoubtedly the Amityville horror
Oh
presentation.
yeah.
Because what I did, I probably dug deep. I mean, I'm not trying to, take credit from anyone, but
No,
I think I
sure.
probably dug deeper into that case more than anyone else has, especially in recent years. Because what I was going to do was do something a little bit different compared to like you hear with a lot of the other cases and films and documentaries and websites that talk about Amityville. I decided to kind of basically talk about the way it should be presented. Although
Mm,
first I spoke about the DeFeo family, like what their lives like, and not only that, when the house was built, anybody else that lived in that house before them, then talk about the DeFeo family's lives,
yeah.
like what it was before they were murdered. Then talk about the Lutz family, how they went through, and again, first talked about it like they would in the in the story, but then eventually kind of come clean to like what really happened in that house, and also everybody else that lived in that house after the Lutzes moved out. And
Yeah.
I still consider that probably one of my favorites because the interesting thing about Amityville, and this once again goes back to my upbringing in the paranormal field, was about the same time that I was getting into, that show Most Haunted and the other paranormal shows.
Yeah.
2005 was also the same year when the Amityville Horror remake came out with
Oh
Ryan
yeah.
Reynolds. And I later found out that there was like, there was an original film from the 70s and that there were several sequels that were made. And my mom was nice enough to get this, even though, again, I was still just 12 or 13. I was able to get the collection of like the first 3 or 4 movies. I still have that collection to this day, and they still
Oh
work. So
wow.
it just really got me hooked. And I'm just not sure what it was, but something just really drew me to that case in particular. And I've
It's
always,
very compelling, isn't it? Like I remember some of your episodes and you really delve into not necessarily the paranormal side, but more the psychological side of what happened to the families, which is a very key aspect of what happened there, wasn't it? It was very much psychological.
well, not only that, I also had something else even more special because not only was it from what I was able to find, and I see Jeremy's in the chat. He's going to know who this is too. We actually had when we used to run the Chicago Ghost Conference for 2 years. We actually had one of the DeFeo kids, one of the actual kids that grew up in that house at this Paracon. So
Wow.
and what he obviously told a very different tale compared to what you hear like either in the book or in the movies or what's and I even shared, some of what he had said on the slideshow, and he says it's not what you think it is.
So go and check out Nick Files, Amityville Horror, all the gossip, all the case is there. It'll be really good. I just want to go back to the comments. So Jeremy, hi Jeremy, who says either Amityville or Stanley. Is that the Stanley Hotel?
Stanley Hotel, I covered that one too.
Nice. Awesome. Jeanette's here. Hi Jeanette. Thank you so much for coming in. And Wayne, right, he's got an
There you
answer.
go.
From 2004 till 5 years ago, I was off camera and working on the Most Haunted Experience events. Wow, that's really cool.
Now
I'm
Wayne
gonna
is
have
someone.
to
Yeah, I was gonna say you'll have to have him on as a
have
guest
to
at
have
some
to
point.
interview you, Wayne. Definitely, if you're up for it. Awesome. Okay, so we've kind of got a few bits of Nick. I'm gonna delve a little bit deeper into kind of what you do. So you talk a lot about films, horror films and TV shows, everything to do with that. So did you study film at college?
Not in college, but I did in high school, in
In high
fact.
school, right? And you had your own club, didn't you? You had a paranormal.
Yeah, that's again another part of how I got into it was in 2007, which at that time I was 14 years old, and not only was that the year that I went on some of my first ever investigations, although at that time they were just part-time investigations, so they only lasted from like a few minutes to an hour. In addition to those, I started a paranormal club at my high school, which I went to Glenbrook South High School, which is just about a mile from where I live. And I'm proud to say that almost 20 years later, that club is still running to this very day.
No way. That's amazing.
So
Wow.
I'm really hoping one day, whenever I have the chance to go out and speak, to the new kids that have been working with it. So it's just been absolutely incredible. And it seems like they've been kind of watching me because last year there was an article about it and they mentioned me and they said, me who's now become, like a full-time paranormal investigator, like, geez, I may have graduated from high school, but they sure as hell been keeping an eye on me since
Oh,
that.
that's so nice. Yeah. You've kind of left a legacy at the high school.
That's correct.
That's so cool. And you do delve into audiobooks. At the moment, you're kind of recording audiobooks. Where did that come from? When did you start? Why?
So it happened from two different occasions. One was there's a website that's they're still making audiobooks to this day, although I haven't really been able to listen to them because after several years you get left behind with whatever series. Certainly it's definitely something. If you're looking for scary stories like audiobooks, this is one I'd highly recommend. It was a website called Chilling Tales for Dark Nights, and it's essentially just a website where they have like people record different audiobooks. Now, at first when they began, it was just short stories. Like it was either creepy pastas or urban legends. They also did of course they also did paranormal stories too, and they'd even had a few it had a number of different narrators from like different parts of the world, but they even had some celebrity guests like do like one story. Like the earliest celebrity guest that they had on that website, believe it or not, was Daniel Radcliffe. He actually did a story for them.
Wow.
I couldn't believe that it was him. And then they've had a number of other people. So at that time, I really wanted to be a part of it. Although, unfortunately, they said at that time my voice just sounded too monotone, which I was disappointed about it. But I wasn't giving up on it. So either way, I still have connections with Chilling Tales for Dark Nights. I just can't really necessarily be part of it. But the other reason what got me into it was really just a few years ago. It was when COVID-19 was taking over and we were all in lockdown. And the fact that you're at home and you got nothing to do unless you're doing a podcast or doing something like this, or just like, you're not going to be able to really do a lot of fun activities when you're in lockdown.
Sure.
So I started listening to a number of other audiobooks on YouTube. One of my favorites, although he hasn't really uploaded any since the last 2-3 years, was a YouTube channel, which it sounds almost the same, but it's really a different channel altogether, called Creepypasta Jr. And he just had this, he didn't talk like creepy or anything like that. He just talked normally, but still made the story sound scary. And
nice.
And that gave me this idea of thinking, what, maybe I should try to give it another try, because at the same time, for a fact this already, but I'm also a huge fan of the scary stories to tell in the dark books. And over the last couple of years, other companies have now been making their own books, like paying homage and tribute to the original trilogy, which, some of them are not even for kids. So at times, some of these books are even more terrifying than the original trilogy. So now some of these books did have audiobooks that were released. But
Right.
still, when I read the other ones that didn't, I'm thinking, these stories are actually really scary, but it would be kind of cool if somebody could make an audiobook out of it. So that's when I had the idea of one to record them, and I even approached the companies. First, I asked them, "Are you guys planning? These stories are great. These books you guys make, but are you guys going to make any audiobooks out of it?" And they said, uh, "We might, but we don't. We just don't really know." So a few months go by, still didn't hear anything. So I decided to reach out and just. I'm not trying to be impatient or anything like that, but I was just very eager, wanting to know.
Yeah.
And they got back to me, and they were like, "No, we don't think we're going to make it." So then I offered, saying, "Well, is there any chance that I could do it myself?" I wasn't asking for money. I wasn't asking to be paid for it. I was just doing it just for
Like
fun.
permission. Yeah.
Yeah, and they gave me the full okay with it, and I guess in some way it was like I kind of had the rights now. It's like every time when I read those books, because when you look at books now, they say no copy of this could be printed, including recordings. That no longer applied to me because I had the permission for it. So,
Oh, that's really good. Yeah. That's
so
interesting. And where can we find these audiobooks that you've done?
most of them are on YouTube, and they're
Okay.
all for free too. Once again, I'm not asking for anybody to pay for them. And however, I am going to be re-uploading them because when I first started doing these audiobooks, I mean, I'm sure you could very well imagine putting these projects together is definitely not easy because you have to really go through. You got to edit them, you got to cut them down to get rid of the
Yeah.
stuff you don't want. Then you got to add the sound effects and music, and that probably actually takes much longer than the actual editing itself.
Yeah.
So, it gets to a point where you just think to yourself, oh man, I just really want to get this done and get to the next one. Well, the problem I did with some of my earlier audiobooks was that I did not carefully test read them to make sure that they sounded 100% authentic and perfect. So, and that was something I recently discovered. So, there were a lot of hidden mistakes that I missed. So, as a result of that, I'm going back to the previous audiobooks before I make any new ones,
Oh,
and
nice.
then I'll be re-uploading them so they sound correct. I already got one book completely done, although I still got to add the sound effects and music to the stories.
Yeah.
But I'm already the first book. I mean, the one I'm working on, in fact, is the very first book that I recorded, which was a book called Corpse Cold: New American Folklore.
Okay. Okay. Interesting. I'll look forward to you kind of re-releasing them and listening to those. That would be really cool.
Hey,
Chantel,
Chantel,
hi. Welcome in. And David, welcome
Dave.
in.
Dave is
Oh,
actually someone I've worked with several years ago. I was on the prior before I joined Things. I used to be part of a different paranormal group, and that was his. That was the Midnight Paranormal Society.
nice. Yeah. Right. Gina says, I really want to investigate someday, but it's so hard in the Bible Belt to meet folks that are interested too. I'm sensitive, so I'm nervous to do it alone. Okay.
She
You have
must
to
be somewhere.
yeah,
Must
let us know where you are, Gina. We'll see
I
if
was
we
gonna
can help.
I was gonna say must be somewhere down in the south, then somewhere in the southern states, because that's where the Bible Belt is.
Interesting. Yeah. Nice. Okay. So, that was really interesting about the audiobooks. Definitely when you've re-released those, do send me the link and I can share those out. I'm really looking forward to listening to those because who doesn't love a scary story, right? All good.
Oh, she's
Um, I'm just
yeah,
Arkansas.
close to the
Okay.
Arkansas border in Mississippi. Okay.
Arkansas border, Mississippi. Okay. Do you know anybody out there, Nick? Investigators?
Um, One of my co-hosts on Supernatural Talk. I'm not sure, although I think she's in Central Mississippi. Oh wait, she said Missouri. Okay, I thought I was going to say we have Eileen Jones who lives in Mississippi, but she's talking about Missouri.
Missouri.
Although,
Okay.
depending where she is in Missouri, we also do have a chapter of the Things Ghost Society in Missouri.
Right. Right. So maybe Jeremy could help you, Gina, as well.
Yeah.
Jeremy's very well connected. Bless him. And Jeremy, yeah, we're going to come on to Things, the Things Network, which we can talk about. David just says, hi Nick, we're at CarmaCon in
Oh,
McKean.
wow.
Oh.
CarmaCon. Is it that hotel that we went? Wait, I don't know if I was there, Dave. I've been to Mattoon several times. Mattoon is down in central Illinois. I've investigated a few locations throughout that town, but I don't know if I've been to that hotel before.
Interesting. And she says, Gina says close to
Mammoth Spring, Arkansas.
Okay.
So she's like in northern Arkansas, southern Missouri.
Yeah, hopefully we can help with that, Gina. We'll get some contacts for you so you don't have to go out by yourself, which will be fun, and make some new friends as well.
Oh, it was that. Okay, so I was there. Yep, I know exactly which hotel Dave's talking about now. Yep.
And Beyond the Veil. Hi, guys. Awesome. Okay. I just want to quickly ask you about your video library, because you do have quite a small yet very interesting little video library that you have. And then we can move on to talk about the Things Network, because it's coming up very, very often about things. And then I'm going to ask you a few more points about the paranormal side, because you are a paranormal investigator. So just the last thing, do you have any gems among your horror films that you've got that you want to show us? Because I know that you're very proud of your horror collection.
Man, it's I guess I didn't really come prepared for that. I should have thought of this earlier, but
oh, that's all right, don't worry.
Well, I will say one thing, because it actually goes back to these books I was talking about. There's one of the most recent ones that was made was a book called Scary Stories: A Tribute to Terror. That's right. Probably the best and close you could ever get to having because obviously the original trilogy, there was only 3 books, and there was a lot of people always asking if a 4th book was ever going to be written, which there were talks about originally in the early 90s. However, the writer of the book, Alvin Schwartz, sadly, he passed away over 30 years ago, so he's no longer with us. And then Stephen Gamble, who's the illustrator, he's still alive today, but he wants no publicity whatsoever, in spite that he created these incredible, terrifying, nightmarish images. That's why so many other people have been making their own versions of what the 4th book would have been like. So in this case with this book, Scary Stories: A Tribute to Terror, the guy who wrote it, his name's Kurt Tuckfield. He lives out in Utah, and he's actually starting to get into the paranormal, in fact, because he's been. I've had the honor of actually chatting with. I mean, the closest I will ever get to meeting Alvin Schwartz is all these writers that have followed in his footsteps. Yeah. So he and I basically became really good friends, as well as also the illustrator of that book. His name's Shane Hunt, and I think I was one of the first to ever buy his book when it first went on sale. And then I later found out, a few months later, this is kind of the gem of what's really cool about this. Kurt then messaged me a few months ago and said that he made an updated version of this book, which I was so mad when I heard about this, because I mean, why did you tell me about this sooner? First, there were a few extra stories that he added into the book, but that's not the gem part. It gets better. He decided to add my name into the acknowledgments, because I think he knew I was such a huge fan of the original books and this book, and I was such a big supporter. I was trying to get people, I was sharing the link out, trying to get people to buy this book to add to their collection. So I think in some way you can kind of say he added me, my name onto it as kind of like a thank you, if you will. So
that's so nice.
Nice.
So cool. Yeah.
The funniest part is I still don't have a copy of it. I still have the original one. I still have the original one. Just don't have the one with my name on it.
Well, anyone out there, it can be a Christmas present.
That would be a true nightmare before Christmas. I'll put it that way. And I did say to Kurt, I actually did ask Kurt, saying, well, is there any way we could trade books maybe? But
nice try. Yeah. Oh, that's cool. Okay, awesome. I'm just going to catch up with the comments again. Allerton Hotel. Allerton is a popular Illinois haunted
No, not Allerton
hotel.
Hotel. That's Arlington Hotels. Yeah, the Sweet Dreams Hotel.
Sweet Dreams.
That's where
Okay.
we stayed at for SilCon last year.
Awesome. And Louisa has a really good question for you. Nick, are you planning any visits to the UK? I know you've got Irish roots.
I trust me. I mean, yes, that too, but for many years I've been trying to get out to the UK. I mean, it's been I mean, obviously it's tough because I got work and whatnot, and of course, you know, you got all this limited time to take vacation. But to this day, I still haven't given up on wanting to go out. I have gotten invites of wanting to come out to the UK.
Yeah.
I'm still trying to get this together. I mean, so for anyone that lives out in the UK, I'm doing absolutely everything in my power of wanting to come out there because
Yeah.
that's
That
something I
would be
really want to
so
do.
good because, I know that you wanted to go to Ireland at some point, so you might as well just make the jump over to, the UK and go to Scotland maybe. There's the group
You see
Paranormal in
Lois.
History, there's Lois that would love to see you, and then I'm sure there's a lot of groups in the UK that would totally love to have you investigate with them over there. It would be an incredible trip.
I just saw
Um,
Wayne's comment.
oh yeah, that's so true.
Well,
He'd
and you
just have
know,
all of his fans everywhere.
well, and see, I can imagine. I've always pictured this. Like I can imagine about coming out to the UK, and then all the investigators that know me are like stacked up at the airport, almost like you see with the Beatles. Almost, it's just I could just picture that right now. But it's actually funny too because it's not only something I really wanted. It's not just the UK I want to check out too. I want to check out other parts of Europe.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a jealous thing for me because here's the funny part: my siblings, they've all gotten to go to Europe. Different parts,
Oh,
including the UK. My dad's taken them. I'm the only one out of all of them who has not gone overseas. I'm like, the hell
oh,
about
you
what
have to
about
go,
me?
Nick. You have to go. Like, you have to plan it. You have to go 100%. Have you got a passport yet?
Yes, I do. I do have the
Oh, there you go.
passport.
You're halfway there. Just have to get the flights then. Because I'm sure you don't even have to book anywhere to stay. You can just couch surf,
Oh,
you
they're
know?
trust me. I mean, I already got, and some of them are people too,
Yeah.
that have already said, don't bother even trying to get like a hotel or motel. You could stay at our place.
Yeah, that's so nice, isn't it? Knowing that you can do that. And Gina says you need to and go all over Sicily is
Yeah,
amazing. Very
Italy.
beautiful part of Italy, definitely. Because your surname's Italian, right?
That's
Mule?
correct. So in addition to my Irish roots, I'm also part Italian, which,
Yay.
or in a better way, say my Irish side comes from my mom's side of the family, which makes my dad's side the Italian side. So that's where my roots come from.
There you go. So you can plan a big trip to Europe at some point. That would be amazing. Definitely. Right, let's talk about Things Network. So you are a member of Things Network. Could you tell us a little bit about what Things is? And you're part of the Illinois chapter because we're in Illinois. Just tell us all about it and how did you meet them?
So to start off, I mean, I know in the case since Jeremy was the one who actually founded it, I know the Things Ghost Society, the actual team itself, had been around far longer before I ever joined. Because from what I saw on the website, they've been around since 2009. But for me, how I got involved, it was actually kind of ironic because at that time, before the Things Network was formed, Jeremy was part of another, and his crew was part of another network, which we no longer have ties with. But at that time, that was the network this was a network that I really want to be a part of because of all these different podcast shows and whatnot. And again, this was during the height of COVID. So, at that time, I couldn't really see a lot of investigators. And something just drew Jeremy and the guy and his friend Scott. They're like, this guy. They said so. I don't know if these are the exact words. So correct me if I'm wrong, Jeremy. Like, this guy Nick. He seems
He
really
said,
interesting. He's like, you want to? Yeah, but it's this. They're like, this guy Nick sounds really interesting. You want to? They're like, you want to come on? I was like, Sure, you got me.
Oh,
I actually had to run all the way up here to my room/office to get ready. So that's when
yeah,
I got to meet Jeremy face and Scott face to face. And it's like from that night on, that's like when a real good friendship was truly born. And we had no idea where it was going to take us at that point, because typical of such podcasts, like when you have a guest on, you may have a really good conversation with them, but then after the show is over, you're done with the
yeah,
guest and then you move on. But Jeremy and I, we stayed in contact, even though it was just only after one time I'd been on the show. He
yeah,
obviously took a liking to me, especially knowing how knowledgeable I was in the field. And we started connecting, and that it really wasn't long until afterwards that near the end of 2020, I was offered to become a co-host for one of the shows that he does, and that's when we really started working together. But then after, again, like I said, about a year later, Jeremy and I decided that we were going to, as well as a few others, we were going to form our own network. Now,
right.
that wasn't originally Jeremy's idea, believe it or not. It was actually a suggestion by somebody else saying that we should start our own network. And honestly, I mean, as long as I was willing to as I was able to still do shows and still work with them, I was all for it. So
Yeah,
around
yeah.
October 2021 was when we started the Official Things Network. And,
Wow.
it started off a little bit slow at first, but we've been obviously, again, I don't like to sound over the top, but we're probably one of the top paranormal networks out there because of all the shows that are a part of, including this one, our
It is
involvement
big,
with it.
isn't it? It's a huge network.
As far as I know, again, maybe I'm wrong, and
Yeah,
I just don't. Maybe I'm wrong, and I just don't know. But as far as I'm concerned, we probably got more paranormal podcast shows than any other network does, and but more importantly, we probably have more paranormal podcasts from around the world than any other network combined.
yeah, because it really is international, isn't it? And I know that there's, things you have each state basically has its own kind of chapter, and it shows and everything. So it is huge. I can't really think of anything that's that big on Facebook, especially like with how much is connected to the network. It really is like a hub of paranormal activity, isn't it?
It
Um,
is. I mean, and just recently, I know you know this already, but I'll still say it anyway. But we recently just got our very first. Well, it's not necessarily our first ever show from Asia. It's our second one, but we just recently got our first ever show from Japan, which is Irene and
yeah.
Amanda who host it. I've been
And
watching
that's
it a few.
amazing show.
It's an incredible show, and it's just so satisfying just to see how far we've really grown as a community, not just here in the United States or North
Mm,
America, entirely, but just completely overseas. And you're hearing this from people who live in countries where most people don't really want to talk about it very often. So
yeah. Or would
it's
only dream of going to, because it's so far away and that they're
Japan's another
talking about.
place. Japan's another
Yeah,
place I'd love to go to and investigate because I know
totally.
they got a lot of history there.
Yeah, that's so true. I just go to the comments again. So Gina said she lived in Sicily for years and was awesome. That's great. Do you speak Italian, Gina? That's super interesting. And she said, I just found Things Network and I love it. That's great. Awesome. Jeremy says, bigger than I ever expected it to
Mm-hmm.
be. Um,
Absolutely.
I think you're right. That's good. Lou has a really good question for you, Nick. Do you do any live investigations like through the network?
Yes, I do. I have done a few of them, and not just necessarily myself. Sometimes I actually film them live for other investigations. Or
Right.
like recently, one of the most recent times I did do that was at the Holy Cross Abbey, which is located in Canyon City, Colorado. Which
Wow.
that place was certainly a location that does not disappoint as far as paranormal activity goes. But what I did was I filmed live for a little while, but what I also did was I filmed the tour as well. So like because some people probably do want to know about the history and get some of the education of this place. Now, understandably, I have done it on my own show, Nick Files, where I talk about the history of it, but not everybody is going to be able to watch it at the same time. So I thought, well,
Right.
if you missed it on Supernatural Talk, and if you just don't have time to watch it, here's a secondary chance where there's actually a tour guide talking about the location.
Nice. That's super cool. Just going to say hi to Supernatural UK. Hi, guys. How are you? Thanks for tuning in. Not anymore, but I used to. Speaking Italian, I guess, Gina. That's cool. And Wild Bill, here he
Hey,
is,
Wild
the
Bill.
legend. And all okay, you too? All good? Awesome. So yeah, Things Network is huge. If you're watching on the other dimension, also check out Things Network. We've been very lucky where we've got this collab with Got Stories to Tell, which is awesome. So thank you so much, Jeremy, for sharing this out on Things Network as well. And thank you, Nick, also for suggesting it, because I would never have thought of doing that. So thank you.
Well, and that's kind of the beauty about Things Network is not all the shows are just restricted to just Things Network. I mean,
Yeah.
some of them have cross stream, like you just said about your own show. But what's even more fascinating is that some of the show hosts on this network have decided to form their own networks, like to kind of,
Wow.
in some way, shape, or form be independent and learn what it's like to basically have their own networks in some way. And a lot of
Right.
them do have a similar theme to what Things Network is, but there is some differences to it. But in some way, there's always some kind of connection to what originally traced back to it. I actually formed, it wasn't necessarily an official group. It was just I decided to form a federation, which I called the Federation of Paranormal Networks, which it's an alliance of all the different paranormal networks we're connected with. Now,
Wow, that sounds serious. That's good.
well, I mean, it's just something. It's not an official group or hierarchy or anything like that. I mean,
No.
the networks are independent and will still do their own thing, but you do have that alliance. If something happens or whatever, like with one network, one of the others, can step in and take over. So it's really quite phenomenal what I put together.
That's awesome. Well done, Nick. That's really, really cool. I think just the main thing about the network and the whole connection that we have is people are just here to be positive about the paranormal and just for knowledge, really, sharing knowledge, experiences, and just to keep it a very positive place, isn't it? And I feel like Things Network and all of the other networks within it have just tried to keep to that, haven't they? Which is really, really lovely, really nice.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, and that's actually the reason why, Nick, like this goes back also to my show, Nick Files. That's why my show is also on a number of these networks because, see, the other thing too about my show, Nick Files, what makes it, stand out from a lot of these other podcasts is it's just such a popular show. And even these other networks, it's drawn the interest of these other networks that they want my show to be a part of it. But it's not always just, wanting me to be a part of it. Sometimes I also make the decision of offering my show onto their networks because understandably a lot of these other networks don't have as many shows as Things Network does. And unlike some of these other investigators out there who are looking to try to get famous or whatever, that's not my intention at all. The reason why I approached and offered my show to these other networks is basically in some way to kind of benefit that network, just so that way they wouldn't have to stay like silent for the entire day. Like even if it's just even if my show was the only show for that day, at least it would help keep that network running.
Definitely. Oh. So yeah, well, Bill, hey Nick, been a while.
Has been.
It's nice when people get along and cross-share on each other's networks. Totally agree, Lou. It's just such a nice, positive atmosphere. While Bill's talking to Lou, he calls her the boss. Jeremy, yeah, we don't do drama. Nope, definitely not. So I wanted to do it. I told you.
Yeah, I wasn't sure either because it sounded like it was quite a huge responsibility. I really had to kind of sit down and think. But what I did, however, do when we first started Things Network, some of the shows that are on this network, I mean, just like yours, was because of me. Because I thought, there's some other podcasts out there that I've been a guest on, and I'm good friends with some of these people. I wonder if I could try to get some of these guys onto the network to help build them. And not
So you're
long
like a
after,
scouter. You're like
I'm basically
headhunting.
I'm basically the recruiter at. In fact, it even has my title on it as a recruiter on the website. If you go on the thing's website,
I
and
see.
not long after we started the network, I probably must have gotten like 3 or 4 shows already onto the network, which we were able to fill up real quick. And even then, I
Yeah.
was like, wow, like I didn't think we were
Mind
going to go that
blown.
fast. That's right,
Totally.
Wild Bill. I met him before Things Network. That's correct.
Jeremy started a great network, 100%. Hats off to Jeremy, honestly. Yeah, so I wanted to ask you, so Things Network and your shows, your podcast, how many shows do you do in a week?
For starters, I probably do more shows than anyone else, but I
I'm just
actually,
interested, like, how
yeah,
many do you
I
do?
I actually do 5 different shows, and
Okay.
from Jeremy,
Jeremy.
10,000 of it. that would probably be enough to fill up for the rest of my life, literally.
Can you imagine? You just don't sleep. You're just
24/7. This is my life.
Big Brother like style.
But yeah, I do 5 different shows from Tuesday to Friday, and I do obviously Fear Fans on Tuesday nights with Don Elmy, who's one of my best
who
friends.
we're interviewing next week. So
That's
next
correct.
Saturday, I'll be interviewing Don.
And then Wednesday, of course, I do my own show, Nick Files. Thursday is the only day where I do 2 shows, which I do To the Grave and Back with Lois, Wayne, and Rosie. And then, of course, later that night, Supernatural Talk with Jeremy, Adrian, and Eileen. And then Friday night, Friday afternoon, I'm back with Lois. But this time with Ian and Bri to do the show, The Frighteners, which understandably, once again, alongside the Nick Files, some of these shows I've also taken a break from because, again, when you're doing 5 shows, it takes up a lot of your schedule. So it got to a point where I needed a break from some of these shows, but I will be getting back on these shows, especially now since I've had a few months off. So again, it's a lot of work putting together, but it's totally worth being a part of.
Yeah, sometimes you just need a bit of time to recharge your batteries and think about things, reflect, and just have some time off. Everyone needs that. Otherwise, I think you'd go insane. So
well, and the craziest thing is, I know this is going to sound hard to believe, and I told Jeremy a little bit about it before a few months ago. Not necessarily, but there might even be a 6 show coming soon. But this show would be far different than the others because unlike the ones that I do, this one would be pre-recorded. I tried doing this last year during the Halloween season. Unfortunately, I just didn't have enough time to put it together. But when we were talking earlier about my audiobooks, I'm kind of putting together more like a mini series, if anything else, based on a Facebook page that I also now have that's called Scary Stories Presented in the Dark. This is where a lot of my news stories are presented. And I even made a little fan company, if you will, called Scary Stories Production. So that's where a lot of these stories are produced and recorded. So I thought it would be kind of cool if I did some kind of small series where I present myself, because I do have a character that I have that I call the Scary Stories host, which you could clearly tell I base them off of special like scary hosts, like either the Crypt Keeper from Tales from the Crypt or the Creep from Creep Show. Very similar case. So there's going to be a 6th one, but that will be pre-recorded, and most likely that will probably not be released until, obviously, as we get closer to the October Halloween season.
Oh, that's exciting. I look forward to that. Awesome, Nick. I'm going to move on because I'm just keeping an eye on time.
Sure.
I really, really, really want to ask you more about the paranormal because you are an investigator, long-time investigator. Now, Lou has asked a really good question, which I think I will just ask straight away off the bat. And it's, what's the most memorable investigation that you've been on? Something that really, really said it for you that you think there is life after death and there is paranormal?
It's actually funny because, again, we were talking about all these years that I got into this field. There was one investigation, and Jeremy, since I know I'm sure this is probably the 100th time he's heard this story, so I'm sorry I have to repeat this story again. So we talked about like different types of things I got involved with, but by the time I got into a full became like a full paranormal investigator, I really started believing it. However, there was one feat. I still had to have my own experience before I could become a full believer. And in August of 2010, I had at that point I was 17 years old. I went to my first full night investigation at Waverly Hills Sanatorium in Louisville, Kentucky.
Wow, that's a historical and staple of a paranormal place.
Yeah, I mean that one was. I still consider that one of my favorite all-time best investigations, especially for a first timer as a 17-year-old. As I've often said, that was probably the one investigation that truly turned me into a man in the paranormal field.
That's a good way of putting it.
But seriously though, the actual investigation itself was just. It was almost like as if it set the stage for me, like I really wanted to experience something, because not long after we began the investigation, things just started happening just like that. And that's usually very rare when you have those and there was a lot of things that occurred that night, although what was even cooler, and this is why I love this investigation so much, by around 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, we had other investigators that were there, which, by the way, I also had to lie about my age to get in. You had to be 18 and you had to be. It doesn't matter. I mean, you had to be 18 or over, even though I was a few months away. Still, you had to.
It's fine. I mean, you were born you were still alive 9 months before you were born.
Exactly. Well, what was around 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning? Many of the other investigators that were there, they left the building, and the next thing I knew, it was just, with the exception with some of the guides, it was just me and my dad. We had the entire building to ourselves. And what better way than for your first ever investigation than to have one of the most famous haunted locations in the world all to yourself, with all the spirits that are said to haunt there. And what's even more amazing, I know I've said this a lot too, but I also did record it. I mean, I know, of course, back in 2010 we didn't have Facebook Live, but we had an old-fashioned video camera. It was like for the late 80s, early 90s, but it did have night vision on it. It was one of those ones that you had to put a little cassette in. And
they're heavy.
It was. But here's the surprising thing. To this day, I've only seen about 10% of that footage because nobody really uses those anymore. I haven't seen, I can't just put it into a VCR and play it because it's the small cassette tape. So whatever else is on that tape, I still don't know to this day. And who knows, I may have captured something incredible. I've often been calling it the lost paranormal tape, which, if given the chance of wanting to try to get it digitized, and I'm able to watch it on a computer, and if I did truly capture something incredible, or even if I didn't, I'm actually hoping maybe to try to, at some point maybe make a documentary out of it, because it's probably the most perfect example of a youth investigator, again, at only 17 years old, investigating, again, one of the most notorious haunted locations.
Yeah. What happened there that kind of opened up your mind to the paranormal?
So it was actually the first thing that occurred. We went up to the 4th floor of the building. Now, I will say, back then when we were there, a good majority of the inside of Waverly was in really bad shape. It was like parts of the walls had fallen off. I mean, it was exposed to the elements, and stairs were inaccessible. The stairs were broken. Now,
because it's abandoned, isn't it? It's not looked after, is it?
Yeah, well, it is now, but back then it was sort of looked after, but it didn't really have as much help as it did now. You go there now, and they've actually cleaned up and fixed a really good portion of
Wow.
the building. But we went up to the fourth floor, and there were
Yeah.
probably about 3 or 4 other investigators with us. And again, had the camera running, so I know that I have this captured on video. And the guy that they had at that time, he tells us it would probably be best if you have your flashlights off. So we
Mm.
turned off the flashlights, and obviously it was pitch black. It was nighttime, obviously, when we went. And after our eyes kind of started to adjust to the darkness, all of a sudden I start seeing all this movement. And at first I thought it was the investigators. I'm like, the hell is that? And but I wasn't just seeing like one source of movement. I was starting to see like different sources. Some were going to the right, some were going to the left, others were coming towards us, others were going away from us. And before I knew it, once my eyes really adjusted, I'll never forget this. It was shadow people that I was seeing, and the way how they were moving, I wouldn't necessarily say they were walking; they were kind of gliding, if you will. And I'm sure you could hear me on tape. You hear this loud gasp from me, which I still remember when I made that gasp. It was not a
Wow.
gasp of fright; it was actually a
Yeah.
gasp of excitement. Like, because when you experience something like that, to me, it was just such an unbelievable feeling because I really had to kind of stop and ask myself, like, am I really seeing this? So
Yeah.
it was just an incredible experience. Again, it was like the building knew I wanted to have an experience, and it's like they set up an entire show for me.
Wow. How would you describe the shadow people? Did they look like children, adults, tall, short,
They
quick?
were they were definitely different sizes. I mean, they were about somewhere in the 5-6 feet high range. Some of them were smaller. No real features or anything like that. They were kind of more transparent than like actually like black shadow people. You can kind of they had a little bit of a glow to them too. So that's why I was able to see
Wow.
them. And although there was one that I thought I had all the ghost stories involved Waverly at that time, but I guess I must have missed one by accident. And there was one figure in particular that was actually crawling on the ground. And I even asked
Oh,
myself, saying, "That's weird. Like, why is that one crawling and the other ones are walking?" I had no idea that there was supposedly a creature that exists, which I later came I later came to the realization that I encountered what is known as the creeper.
wow. Is that like an elemental then? It's not really a real person, like soul.
So some people say it's like it could be an elemental. There's other people who say it could actually be possibly a patient that may have lived and died in the
Okay.
sanatorium, but may have had some kind of walking issue. Although what's more surprising is that whenever the creeper is around, it actually appears more to female guests than male guests. So I'm not sure.
Right.
I mean, why it exactly appeared in front of me, I have no idea. And the other thing is that when people said that they've seen this thing, it actually makes kind of like a clicking sound. Like, I think it's from its fingers when it crawls. But I didn't, as far as I can remember, I don't remember hearing anything. And there's also times where people said they've actually seen it crawl on the ceiling. I've actually
Wow.
sometimes I even sometimes call it the Spider-Man of Waverly because it crawls just like Spider-Man at times.
Well, that's slightly terrifying. Thank you for
Yeah.
that image. That's really interesting. Did you feel like it was um do you think it was stone tape theory, or do you think they were actually there, stuck there? Or
I
did they
don't
want to be there? Like, what was the atmosphere? What was the feeling?
the feeling I remember, I mean, again, I know I was just a teenager then, so obviously there was a lot of excitement, but I didn't really feel anything anything that could have been a threat to me. There were times that we did feel a negative energy, but again,
Right.
even at that age, I wasn't even really that scared because I was willing to confront whatever was there. One of the other weirdest things that occurred when we were there was I think it was either the second or third floor, and at one point we had to take a break because I needed to get some water and all because when we investigated, you have to remember this was late August. This was still
Yeah.
summer, so it was humid that night and it was
Yeah.
hot. It was so, oh my God, the heat was unbearable. And so we're going back to the safe house, as they call it, which is a smaller building off to the side of Waverly, which despite its name, that building too gets activity there too.
Right.
So we're walking down the hallway, and when you're walking down the hallway, it seems like every room you pass looks just the same. So you don't really think too much of it. But my dad, he's like, here, hold on one second. I just want to stop in this room. I'm like, well, why do you want to stop in that room? Because it's just no different than any other room. So I decided to go along with it, despite of how hot and thirsty I was. So we walk in and we found out this room was a little bit larger compared to the rest of them. What we didn't realize was, as we got closer, we started to see an embalming table. We started seeing body chutes, and before we knew it, we realized we were in the morgue.
Yeah.
And then, really not long after we entered that room, we started. There was just this, basically like a sulfurous smell that came out of nowhere. I mean, it was just. I don't even know really. I mean, the best way I could describe the smell is it almost smelled like that of a dried corpse. It was just a disgusting.
And nobody farted.
No, it was just me and my dad.
Yeah.
So yeah, it definitely wasn't. I mean, this was just, to me, it was like the smell of death that I smelled, and it was only there for about a minute before it eventually disappeared. But it's a type of smell that once you smell it, you'll never forget it. That kind of stench.
That's incredible. That's so interesting. Just have a look at these comments. Louisa says that you should definitely get this converted, and I agree. You have to get the tape converted so that you can go through the footage again, and that would be so interesting. And Lou says maybe as you were younger and less of a threat, like females in comparison to males. That's very true, because you were only 17, weren't you? So very open and not a threat to spirits at all,
It's very possible. And what Lou said one night, I still remember after when we ended up leaving the building around 6 or 7 a.m. and I'll never forget, me turning around to look at the building one final time as the sun was rising, and I was like, I know I'll be back real soon. Although it would be several years before I would go back, and my next time I ended up going back would not be until 2020, over a decade later in 2021 with Jeremy and several others. And when I walked into the building and saw how much more has been fixed up at Waverly, I mean, I literally was like, I was like, I can't believe what I'm seeing here. This is not this is so much different than what I remember over a decade ago. It was just, they did their job fixing this building up.
That's good. That's really good that it's been saved. It hasn't been left to ruin, because it's such a historical building. It really is. A lot of history there.
There is, and there's a lot of people. Unfortunately, there's a lot of others out there who've been trying to take advantage of the building. Like, there have been attempts of wanting to make it into a hotel, which, not everyone. I mean, yes, that would no longer keep you at risk of trespassing, but I think a lot of people like Waverly the way it is as an abandoned building. And you have to remember, keep in mind, this was originally a type of hospital for almost 60 years. It wasn't really meant to be a place for people to actually live and sleep in unless you had TV back then. But of course, obviously now they've changed use of the building. It's no longer a building to house for the sick and dying, although no longer a place for the sick and dying. It's nonetheless a very haunted location.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Hi, Adrian. How
Hey,
you
Adrian.
doing? And Lee says it's awful when you see such historical locations left to ruin. 100%. Yeah. Instead of building all these new places, it'd be nice to fix up the old ones and have housing in them sometimes.
We got a building not too far from here that is kind of been left to ruin. Long story short, it's a location called the Mignolo Hotel. It's in a town called Fox Lake, which is just about 50 minutes away from here. And that was a hotel back in the day. You know, it was built in the 1880s, and it was supposedly, again, there's no evidence to say that he was actually there, but they say for a lot of these locations, supposedly it was a location where notorious Chicago gangster Al Capone frequented during the weekends. And
Wow.
but even when it was in operation, there were stories already of the hotel being haunted. But unfortunately, it's been abandoned. In fact, I think the last time that, as far as I can remember, the last year of the hotel, I believe it was back in 1963. That was actually I think that was the last year where they actually had a guest check
Right.
in and out. And then after that, the hotel was closed, but the bar and restaurant was open. And
Right.
and then by the mid 80s, it was falling into ruin. They did add a new roof and parts of walls, but unfortunately, even then, not long afterwards, even the new roof and walls kind of started falling apart. And the bar closed then in 2012. So now the entire building's been abandoned ever since. So there have been many attempts of trying to save the building, but it's been
That's a
kind of
shame.
left to rot to the present day. It's actually one of the top 10 buildings in the state of Illinois that's on the endangered list.
Wow. I hope they can do something with it before it's too late, but
I hope so.
sounds like it's really getting bad now.
It is.
Yeah.
I went there a few years ago. Of course, obviously, I can only check it out from the outside. Which, a word of warning: there's mariners that are right nearby the building, and you got to just be careful, like where you are, because even though they don't necessarily own the building, they're not the friendliest people. When they saw us, I mean, they tolerated us for a little while, but then after that, they rudely told us to leave. So
Yeah, sure.
it's unfortunate when you see such, and it's not even just the ghost stories involved. You know, just seeing a beautiful historic building just being left to rot.
Yeah, that's a shame. It really is. I just want to ask you one question about your paranormal equipment because you have a lot. You have a whole case full of paranormal equipment. I just want to ask, what is your go-to for an investigation? What do you think really works for you?
So I know I'm not the first to say this, but I would probably say a lot of the, although I bring a lot of the equipment with me, the main go-to stuff would be actually a lot of the older paranormal tools. So like,
Yeah.
you know, dowsing rods, crystals, pendulums, of course also a compass, which I recently discovered can be of use. And I know Jeremy's gonna know exactly what else. Undoubtedly the dog whistle too.
What's the dog whistle?
So the dog whistle, that was something that Jeremy introduced me to. It's just like, you know, like any real dog whistle. But you know, like when you blow into dog whistles, like you don't really hear anything, but the dogs can.
Oh, because of the frequency.
Yeah, the frequency. So
Oh.
I think so. Jeremy would kind of describe, and I'm sure he'll describe a little bit more in the chat too, which if dogs are able to hear it but we can't, what are the odds that spirits on the other side can also hear it too? Because it's kind of like
Mm.
a white noise device, if you will. So I've used the dog. So you know the dog whistle. I've used it myself a couple of times, and it's the results we've gotten. The responses have been really interesting. A word of advice, however. Again, I know
Did
he's
dogs come running?
no, actually, even worse. Actually, worse than that. If anybody wants to try the dog whistle, always make sure. I'll just actually no. I'll say it this way: do not use it in outside locations like haunted cemeteries or forests. Trust me, you will be sorry because there was a funny story involved. There were two investigators that Jeremy and I know. They tried the dog whistle at a cemetery at night, and oh, they definitely got good results at the cemetery, all right. But they also had a pack of coyotes coming for them, so they.
Oh no.
So
Oh
yeah,
yeah, that's you have to be careful with that.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's more of an inside tool. So yeah, like I said, don't use it outside. You will be sorry.
Yeah. That's interesting. Like the dog whistle, because I've seen people use the death whistle. Um, yeah, the death whistle. I think it's like Mayan or something, and it's like to do with their tradition of when somebody passed, they would blow the death whistle, and it's a horrible sound. I have
Yeah.
to say, it's a bone chilling sound. I hate it when they use it.
Surprisingly, I don't have a death whistle, but I don't know if it was
I don't
Jeremy.
know.
I
I
don't
don't
know.
know if that's like respectful though. I don't know.
I don't know
It's
either. I don't know if it
ethical
was.
questions, right? Because, you know, they
I
want
don't
to
know if it was.
rest.
Okay, yeah, okay. The death. See what Jeremy said. The death whistle is a battle instrument, so
Is it? Okay.
apparently, yeah. Because I don't have. I have the dog whistle, but I don't have the death whistle. I think Brad Webb has made a few death whistles himself.
Who's made a few death whistles?
Bra-
Your audio
Uh,
went a bit weird.
Brad Webb. He does.
Okay.
He's part of Cracked Skull Paranormal, but he's also part of the Things Ghost Society himself. Him and his wife.
Nice. Oh, we got some good comments here as well. So letting someone buy something super cheap that would be willing to restore. Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's a good idea.
We
Yeah.
talked about something like that, as a matter of fact. We talked about maybe if there's some way we could do like a GoFundMe or just some. Jeremy, myself, and a few others. We've talked about maybe doing some like, and not just for the Mignola Hotel. It would be for a number of these locations that have been kind of left
Yeah.
to rot because there are so many of them out there that have just been left that have been abandoned and forgotten.
Yeah, that would be good. I don't know. Metaphysical properties. So it's a good attract. Okay, nice. Have to try that one, Nick. Get 100 death whistles to get. Oh yeah,
Oh
I'm
my
sure
God.
it will. Like 100 bagpipes and all that stuff.
Probably
you know.
probably could hear her within like a 10-mile radius.
Totally. Can you imagine? Everyone would just be like, "Nope."
I think probably after you get 100 of those and you hear them all together, I think most likely you're never going to be able to hear anything again after that.
No. Oh, good. Well, Nick, I think we definitely have to continue our conversation on another episode of Got Stories to Tell because I'd love to know more about your paranormal side, more stories. We can talk about different theories, maybe, which would be interesting. I think that should be the focus. If you agree to come on for another episode one time, that would be awesome
Absolutely.
to have you back. Definitely.
Yeah, I would be more than happy to be a part of it because, it's just like what I always say with a lot of these shows. Like, it's amazing how fast the time goes by because, you and I or anyone else, I mean, we could be talking about this stuff for hours on end. And
Oh,
there's so
yeah.
much more. And trust me, I mean, there's so much more stories that it's scare tactic. There's so much more stories definitely for me to tell, considering, because I will say this just to throw for a future episode. It's not only just paranormal stuff, because I also do a lot of the cryptozoological and ufology stuff too. So I'm kind of all over the place.
Okay, so next episode, paranormal / ufology. We have to do it. I love that stuff. Okay, it's a plan. Awesome. Okay, so thank you everybody for joining the episode today. Thank you, Jeanette. Thank you, Lou. Ben and Lou, thank you so much. Absolutely loved it. Oh, that's so nice. Wayne loves working with everyone loves working with you, Nick. You're just awesome. Lovely. All right. So we'll wrap it up there until next time where we do paranormal and ufology. Thank you so much, Nick, for coming on the show. Really, really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Do you
My
have
pleasure.
any shout outs? Do you want to give any shout outs about any upcoming shows or?
Well, like I said before, with Nick Files, I'll say it again just in case anybody missed it earlier. I am going to be bringing back Nick Files sometime in either the last few days of March or sometime either the first or second week of April. Now, of course, that could be subject to change. I don't want to keep any promises just yet, but I do have a list of locations I would like to talk about on the show. So, but nonetheless, Nick Files will be back. I also have, what else do I got going on? I'm also hoping to plan a few investigations for this upcoming year. I actually have one coming up next Friday, which I'm really looking forward to being a part of. So,
yeah,
and
watch
also
this
too,
space.
Well, and also too, I'm also, like I said earlier too, is as far as the audiobooks, again, I have taken a little break on them because again, it's a lot of work putting together because again, you're working when you're putting these together, it takes hours or days to even get
Yeah.
completed. But I am starting to slowly but surely get back into it. And you know, I guess the bottom line is I'm hoping to release them real soon and hoping everybody would love to check out the re-release stories, new ones, as well as you know, if they want to check out Nick Files too, you know, just come by, say hello, and see what my show Nick Files is all about.
That's great. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Nick. Big shout out to my dad. I know my dad's watching. He's also really into the aliens and ufology, so maybe I can try and convince him to come on with us next time. We'll see. Fingers
That'd be
crossed.
awesome. That'd be awesome.
Hell yeah. Thank you, Gina. All right. So bye, guys. Have a wonderful weekend and looking forward to seeing everybody. Next Saturday, I will be interviewing Don Elmy, a good friend of me and Nick's as well.
He's my buddy.
Yeah, he is. He's your bestie.
He is. He is. And like I said, Kate, thanks again so much for having me. This was great.
You're very welcome. Thank you so much. So wishing everybody a lovely weekend and see you next time.
Take care.